Audible is the leading provider of spoken word entertainment and audiobooks, ranging from bestsellers to celebrity memoirs, news, business, and self-development. Every month, members get 1 credit to pick any title, plus 2 Audible originals from a monthly selection, and access to daily news digests from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post, as well as guided meditation programs. Between a full-time job in IT and a full-time job in podcasting, it gets harder and harder to sit down and read the books I'm interested in. This is where Audible comes in. I can listen on my daily commute, relaxing, or while out running errands and still get in the books I've been wanting to get into. You can download titles and listen offline anytime, anywhere. The app is free and can be installed on all smartphones and tablets. Now you can try Audible risk-free with a special 30-day free trial by visiting audibletrial.com/nerdery and murdery. That's audibletrial.com/nerdery and murdery. Don't let your busy life get in the way of that great book you've been wanting to read. Go get your free trial of Audible today. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. This is Geoffrey, and we've talked about many times before that I experience problems and struggles with my mental health, and really without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy does work. It's helped for me, but what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships at work, or you're not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's really time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles, and it's time to start feeling better because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in-person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is a customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. So join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are your greatest asset. And there's a special offer to Nerdery and Murdery listeners. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/nerdery and murdery. That's betterhelp.com/nerdery and murdery. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast.
You're listening to the sweet sounds of Nerdery and Murdery.
You're an idiot. Welcome to episode 103 of Nerdery and Murdery.
Big 103. I'm Zig with your nerdery.
I'm Geoffrey with your murdery. Welcome to the ups and the downs, the highs and the lows, the good, the bad, the nerd and the murd. Zig, why don't you take it away with the nerdery side of the house?
Sweet. Today we're going to talk about Star Trek Discovery.
All right, so I have nothing for this.
You haven't seen any Disco?
I haven't watched any of the Star Trek Discovery episodes.
Disco is greatness.
That's what I've heard. I just haven't watched any of it. Chelsea's watched it, but I haven't seen any of it.
Well, it's an American television series created by Brian Fuller and Alex Kurtzman for the streaming service CBS All Access, which is now Paramount Plus. It's the 7th Star Trek series and debuted in 2017, and the first since Star Trek Enterprise concluded in 2005. The series follows the crew of the Starship Discovery beginning a decade before Star Trek, the original series in the 23rd century. But at the end of the second season, Discovery travels to the 32nd century, which is the setting for the subsequent seasons. So the first two seasons are contemporaneous with Pike.
Mm-hmm.
And since the third season, they've been in the 32nd century. Which explains why we don't have spore drives later on in Star Trek, because it was a prototype. Actually, there were 2 of them. One of them got destroyed, but it went to the future, so that's why we don't have spore drives anymore. That you have to have a giant tardigrade to run it. Shaniqua Martin Green stars as Michael Burnham, a science specialist on Discovery who eventually becomes captain. Doug Jones, Shazad Latif, Anthony Rapp, Mary Weissman, Jason Isaacs, Wilson Cruz, Anson Mount, David Ajala, Rachel Ancheri, Blue DeBarrio, and Tig Notaro also have starring roles. The series begins around 10 years before the events of Star Trek, the original series, when Commander Michael Burnham's actions start a war between the United Federation of Planets and the Klingon Empire. She is court-martialed, stripped of rank, reassigned to the USS Discovery, which has a unique means of propulsion called the Spore Drive. After an adventure in the Mirror Universe, Discovery helps end the Klingon War. In the second season, they investigate 7 mysterious signals and a strange figure known as the Red Angel, and fight off a rogue artificial intelligence. The conflict ends with the Discovery traveling to the 32nd century, more than 900 years in the future. The USS Discovery finds the Federation fragmented in the future, and then investigates the cause of a cataclysmic event known as the Burn. In the third season, Burnham is promoted to captain of Discovery at the end of the season, and the fourth season the crew helps rebuild the Federation while facing a space anomaly created by unknown aliens that causes destruction across the galaxy. And in the fifth season, the Discovery goes on a galactic adventure to find a mysterious ancient power that other dangerous groups are also searching for. And we should be getting the sixth season out pretty soon. I want to say in the next few months. Right now, we're in the middle of Picard. So for our listeners out there who may be unfamiliar, Paramount Plus, the streaming service, is basically showing Star Trek all year round now. And what it does is it will show one show for a few months, and then when that one ends, it usually has about a 2-week lag between the next show picking up. So we basically have Star Trek all year long now, with Discovery, Picard, Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, and there's also a children's story, which is for kids, a Prodigy. But yeah, we have Star Trek 52 weeks out of the year, except for, as I said, there's usually like a 2-week break between the two shows. So it's really nice now. You get to watch Star Trek. You have new Star Trek all the time. 10-year-old me would be excited.
Mm.
So the stuff in the future, the Burn, I kind of want to talk about that for a second. What happens in the Burn is every dilithium using warp device that is currently engaged when the burn happens explodes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a pretty bad deal. So, I mean, the ships are fine as long as they were sitting in space dock, but if their warp drive was engaged when it happened, the warp drives, or the dilithium in the warp drives exploded, which caused the warp drives to explode. It was awful. The series announced in November 2015. It's produced by CBS Studios in association with Secret Hideout and Roddenberry Entertainment. Fuller was initially set as showrunner, but left due to creative differences with CBS. He was replaced by Gretchen J. Berg and Aaron Harberts, with production support from Akiva Goldsmith for the first season. Berg and Harberts were fired by CBS during production of the second season. Kurtzman took over as showrunner and was joined by Michelle Paradise with the third season. Filming takes place at Pinewood Toronto Studios in Toronto, Canada, as well as on location around the world. Discovery features more serialized storytelling than previous Star Trek series, but is more episodic in later seasons. Existing franchise designs were reinvented to take advantage of the modern technique and visual effects. On November 2nd, 2015, CBS announced that a new Star Trek television series would premiere in January of 2017 on the heels of the 50th anniversary of the Star Trek original series in 2016. This was the first Star Trek series since Star Trek Enterprise concluded in 2005, and the first series to be developed specifically for the CBS All Access streaming service, again, now known as Paramount Plus.
Mm-hmm.
Alex Kurtzman, co-writer of the film Star Trek and Star Trek Into Darkness, and Heather Cadden were set as executive producers. The January 2017 date was the earliest that CBS could release a new Star Trek series after an agreement the company made when it split from Viacom in 2015. So they released it as soon as they were able to, as soon as that contract expired. Showtime, Netflix, and Amazon Video all offered a lot of money for the rights to stream the series. But after heavily investing in the new all-access service, CBS believed that the returning Star Trek could be the franchise that really puts all access on the map. In January 2016, CBS President Glenn Geller said that the network would broadcast the first episode, but was creatively involved in this series, saying it really is for all access. And they did. They released that first episode on CBS. Too much fanfare. And then of course, you got all the subsequent episodes on CBS All Access, which is now Paramount Plus.
Mm-hmm.
There was some contention with the showrunners. They did a lot of shuffling around with the showrunners. Brian Fuller, of course, came on and left. And then they got Berg and make sure I pronounce this name correctly. Sorry. And Harberts. I keep wanting to call him Herbert, but it's Harberts. Came on for a season and then they left. And Akiva Goldsmith took over with Michelle Paradise. And they've been running it ever since. But usually when that happens in a series or a movie or something, it generally spells trouble for the production. In this case, it really didn't. They just kept rolling along. They sort of changed the focus after the third season. There's usually an overreaching big bad thing that they're trying to do, but you can watch the episodes individually and it doesn't take away from the full storyline. They're all self-contained. So with Fuller, he began his career writing for the series Deep Space Nine and Voyager. Fuller was announced as the new series showrunner and co-creator alongside Kurtzman in February 2016. Nicholas Myers, writer and director of Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan and Star Trek Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country. My dyslexia switched the V and the I. Sorry. Also joined the series as a consulting producer. Nicholas Meyer joining kind of helped. In March, Rod Roddenberry, the son of Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry and Trevor Roth of Roddenberry Entertainment, also joins the series as executive producer. So Rod has had a hand in sort of getting a lot of this stuff off the ground. I don't want to say just as a cheerleader. He is a huge cheerleader of Star Trek, but he's also some ideas about the nuts and bolts because he's gotten into production in the last 20 years or so. Because when he was young man, he was very anti-Star Trek because he felt like it took his dad away from him. Mm-hmm. But he basically carries the mantle now, mostly for the fans, because when he started becoming a champion for Star Trek by going to conventions and talking to people and just for hours, people telling him what the show meant to them. And so he's sort of, again, I don't want to say just a cheerleader, but he is definitely a cheerleader for not only Star Trek itself, but the fans. Fuller said working with people previously involved with Star Trek was really about making sure that they maintain authenticity. And said Meyer, who is widely considered to have made the best Star Trek film in The Wrath of Khan, brought a clarity and cleanliness to the storytelling. Fuller had publicly called for Star Trek to return to television for years, particularly because of its impact on minority groups. And he explained, "I couldn't stop thinking about how many black people were inspired by seeing Nichelle Nichols on the bridge of the ship. I couldn't stop thinking about how many Asian people were inspired by seeing George Takei and feeling that that gave them hope for their place in the future. I wanted to be a part of the representation of the new era. He proposed an anthology series with each season being a standalone serialized story set in a different era that would begin with a prequel to the original series, followed by a story set during the original series and then during Next Generation and then beyond at a time that Star Trek's never seen before. Fuller compared that to what American Horror Story did for horror and described the proposal as a platform for a universe of Trek shows. CBS instead suggested he create a single serialized series to see how well that performed. I'm going to be honest, even though they got rid of Brian Fuller, it kind of seems like they kept his idea, because right now Discovery's in the 32nd century.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Picard is set at the beginning of the 25th century, and Strange New Worlds is set in the 23rd century. We kind of have that. Lower Decks is somewhere between Picard and the end of Next Gen, basically. Fuller then began further development of a concept of prequels to the original series. He announced in June 2016 that the first season would consist of 13 episodes, though he would prefer to produce 10 episodes a season moving forward. A month later, Fuller announced the series title, Star Trek Discovery, and revealed that it would be set in the Prime timeline, which included the previous Star Trek series, but not the modern reboot films, such as Star Trek Into Darkness and Star Trek Beyond. But this was to keep the concurrent series and films separate, so we don't have to track anything happening in the films, and they don't have to track what we're doing. Also, in July, CBS Studios International licensed a series to Netflix to release outside the United States and Canada. A blockbuster deal that paid for the series' entire budget, which was $6 to $7 million per episode at the time. During pre-production of the series, Fuller and CBS had disagreements on its direction. The production began to overrun its per-episode budget and was falling behind schedule due to Fuller supervising all aspects of the series while also showrunning another new series, American Gods. That caused frustration among CBS executives who felt Fuller should be focused on having Discovery ready for release in July of 2017. By August 2016, Fuller had hired Gretchen J. Berg and Aaron Harberts, whom he had worked with on Pushing Daisies, to serve as co-showrunners with him. A month later, he and Kurtzman asked CBS to delay the series release so they could meet the high expectations for it. And the studio pushed the premiere back to May of 2017. At the end of October, CBS asked Fuller to step down as showrunner and announced a restructuring of the production, with Berg and Harberts were made sole showrunners, working from a broad story arc and overall mythology established by Fuller, Kurtzman. And Fuller would continue as executive producer, but with Fuller moving his attention fully to American Gods, and Akiva Goldsmith would join as a supervising producer, similar to the role he held on Fringe alongside Kurtzman. CBS said they were still happy with Fuller's creative direction of the series, but some elements that came from him, including designs and more heavily allegorical and complex story points, were soon dropped. Fuller later confirmed that he was no longer involved with the series, which was a bit of a shame, because Fuller really was a champion. But again, I kind of understand CBS's point. Hey, you're also working on this American Gods show. How can you really devote your time to both as showrunner? Because being a showrunner, you really can't be a showrunner to two different shows at once.
Right. Right.
It's pretty much all consuming. Which is why Akiva Goldsmith was basically brought on, because he's kind of in with some of the other guys in the head of production for Star Trek. They've basically got one person in charge of all of the productions, but not as showrunner, Alex Kurtzman. Alex Kurtzman's not really showrunning any of the shows. He's just basically running. He's trying to tame the horse, as it were,
Mm-hmm.
and let the showrunners get on with the business of what they do. which is really what they should have done in the first place. I think that was the idea, but it kind of got away from them for a while. And it seems to be working. Um, Again, Fuller's idea of having several series running at the same time, where you get a series and 3 months later you get another series, and so on, is a brilliant idea. And they've got several in the works right now. There's a Section 33 series that's about to be released with Michelle Yeoh, who just won an Oscar.
Mm-hmm.
So that one's going to be fun. As well as I think they've got an Academy series coming out. I know they've been talking about it. I don't know.
They've been talking about an Academy series for many years.
Yeah, I think they actually finally got into some serious production on it, but I don't think it's officially been greenlit. I know that they are really heavily invested in getting the Section 33 series released because Discovery's, I think it ends its run next season. I think we get this season and next season, if I'm not correct. It may just be this season. But they wanted to give it like a 7-season run.
Right.
So with production set to begin in January 2017, careful deliberation was going into the series' production value and effects. Ted Sullivan joined as supervising writing producer, and CBS Interactive president Mark I'm not even going to try it. Dbevoise.
DeBevoise?
Yeah, or Beauvoir, but that's not how you say Beauvoir.
I don't know.
Revealed that the episode order had been expanded to 15 episodes. In June, CBS announced a new premiere date of September 24th, 2017, and Kurtzman said that he had discussed future seasons with Fuller before the latter's departure. Kurtzman promised that the series set up characters' big ideas and big movements of the season were all true to Fuller's original plans. And in August, Goldsmith said future seasons would have a hybridized approach, with each season having its own story arc and a mixture of new and familiar characters. Kurtzman added that the success of Discovery could lead to other new Star Trek series, and he was correct. By the end of August 2017, Berg and Harberts had developed a roadmap for the second season and the beginning of one for a third. It was also revealed that an average episode for the first season had cost $8 to $8.5 million, making it one of the most expensive television series ever made. That exceeded the original Netflix deal, but CBS still considered the series paid for due to the number of new CBS All Access subscribers that it was expected to draw. After the series premiere, Kurtzman said that producers wanted to avoid announcing release dates for future seasons due to the external pressure caused by delaying the first season's premiere after it was announced. Despite this, he hoped a second season would be available in early 2019. The second season was officially ordered in October 2017 and consisted of 13 episodes. Goldsmith did not return for the season after clashing with the series' writing staff, while Meyer was not asked to return for the second season. In June 2018, when production of the second season went underway, CBS fired Berg and Harberts. This was due to the first episode of the season going significantly over budget, as well as alleged abusive behavior by the pair directed at the other writers. Kurtzman was made showrunner and was set to regroup the writers' room. So Alex Kurtzman took over the second season and was confirmed to be on track for a January 2019 premiere, though that ultimately was enough to delay in production. The CBS extended the season's episode count to 14 as a way to amortize the cost of the delay. Shortly after that season premiere in February, the season was renewed for a third season with writer Michelle Paradise promoted to co-showrunner alongside Kurtzman. In October 2019, Kurtzman said this third season would consist of 13 episodes. Active development on a fourth season had begun in January 2020, and it was officially announced in October. Also in October, Kurtzman was asked how long he intended for Discovery to continue, especially with other streaming series being canceled during the COVID-19 pandemic, and he said there were years and years left on Discovery. A 10-episode fifth season was ordered in January 2022, which is expected to be released in 2023. So that's the one that's coming up in the next couple of months. So there was some contention with the writers' room and moving the showrunners around.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it wasn't really animosity with Fuller. It was just Fuller was trying to ride too many horses at once. So, but he left them a lot of notes and had them set up with the other two, Harbord and Berg. There was some sort of contention in the writers' room. No one's really said what it was, but apparently they were pretty rough on the writers. I am pretty happy with their output. I can't say this. There was some controversy with the first season. The first season basically deals with the Klingons. When they released the designs for the Klingons, they looked really unusual and strange, and it kind of bothered a lot of fans. Basically, they were all bald.
Mm-hmm.
And in the second season, they discuss, hey, the Klingons started growing their hair again. So the next time you see them, they have hair. And you realize the designs that they showed for the Klingons weren't really that off base. They just look different when they're all bald. The makeup was very similar to the makeup that they'd used before. They were just using different materials, so it made it look a little more alien. And you got to remember, too, the Klingon design has gone through several different phases. I mean, originally it was just brown paint, with some, red highlights and big beards. And then they went to the head ridges in, the first film. And then they, and then they made those head ridges more pronounced as the next generation came on. And so the development of the Klingon prosthetics has been an ongoing thing since the 60s. I will say this. Their attention to detail with the Klingon language in Discovery, particularly the first season, is amazing. Mary Chieffo probably speaks better Klingon than I've ever heard.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where she is originally from. I probably should have looked that up. I think she's American, but she may have had some sort of background in linguistics. Her Klingon is amazing. I can just sit and listen to it. When she speaks it, it's pretty, if that makes sense. Sharif, who spends a lot of time with her when they're doing a lot of talking, he gave his Klingon a little bit of an Arabic accent because he's a native Arabic speaker. So when he speaks, it's a little different than hers, almost like they're from two different parts of Kronos. It's amazing. Star Trek Discovery, if nothing else, has the best Klingon speech you will ever hear. And if you like that language, you get to hear it all. And they dialed it in. I wasn't unhappy with the characters' designs. I think they were along that trajectory of how Klingon character designs go. I was a little unhappy with their ship designs. I wish they would have been a little more next generation-y.
Mm-hmm.
But that could just be because I love the way the Bird of Prey and the oh my god, Vortscha cruiser look. The Vortscha cruiser from Next Generation, I think, is the best Klingon design ship there is. I wish they'd have gone with that. The Vortscha is the cruiser you see most often in Next Gen.
Mm-hmm.
It's the one it's got that little bridge kind of at the top of it where they look like they've merged Klingon and Federation technology together. It's my favorite. Great ship too. Fuller did want originally, sorry, circling back as we do. Fuller wanted to differentiate Discovery from previous Star Trek series by taking advantage of the streaming format of All Access and telling a single serialized story across the entire first season. Inspired by the general change in television to tell those kind of stories rather than the new destination-based adventure each week, format mostly used in previous Star Trek series, Fuller had been one of the several writers during the 1990s pushing for Deep Space Nine and Voyager to move toward this type. The producers wanted to build towards Roddenberry's Star Trek ideas and show that you can't simply be accepting and tolerant without working on it, and chose to ignore Roddenberry's long-standing rule that Starfleet crew members not have significant conflicts with one another, or the Burmized version.
Right.
Fuller saw the series as a bridge between Star Trek Enterprise and the original series, which is set around 150 years apart, but set much closer to the later to allow Discovery to use the later's iconic designs and costumes. The series ultimately moved away from those designs after Fuller's departure. The first season tells the story of the Federation Klingon Cold War that had been mentioned in Star Trek before, but not depicted on screen. The season finishes with the end of the war, which allows the writers to move beyond Fuller's established storyline. It introduces more elements from the original series, including the USS Enterprise at the end and its crew. And you find out that Michael Burnham is actually the adopted sister of Spock. And, a lot of people were bothered by that. But if you remember in the fifth movie, when Spock sees Sybok, he goes, "Oh, hey, it's my half brother," and everybody looks at him like, "You have a brother?"
Mm-hmm.
Spock just plays that stuff close to the vest.
Right.
He doesn't talk about that stuff. Like when in Amok Time, it's like, T'Pring is my wife. What? You are married? He didn't talk about that with other people. In Strange New Worlds, he talks about that stuff with Pike. Pike knows about it because Pike is his friend. Spock views Pike as someone he can talk to, whereas he doesn't really talk to Kirk or McCoy or anybody else about that stuff. I think it's pretty interesting how they kind of played that out. So Kurtzman felt the jump to the future had opened up new variables and storytelling opportunities. The second season with the red anomaly and the person in the red suit fixed the breach and the timeline.
Mm-hmm.
So where we had the different timeline for the J.J. Abrams series, Star Trek Discovery fixed that plot hole, returned the timeline to what it was supposed to be because of the red wave. It had to do with basically some time experiments that got away from someone. But it ended up stranding the crew of the Discovery at the end of the season in the future. And everybody in Starfleet was not allowed, who was present when it happened, is not allowed to talk about it because nobody wants them messing up the timeline, as it were. When they start working on the temporal accords and things like that. Because you're not allowed to, in Star Trek, you can travel in time. It's possible, or in the old series. However, it is exceedingly regulated. And it basically explains how they set those temporal accords and ideas up. Like the Federation's not allowed to use a cloaking device because of treaties and agreements. Even though the Romulans are gone, they still are not allowed to use a cloaking device. Beginning with the third season, astrophysicist Aaron McDonald joined the series. It was on a spectrum of and the other Star Trek series, basically as a scientific advisor for everybody, not just Discovery. McDonald said each series was on a spectrum of science to fiction, and Discovery was way more on the science side. So to ensure science accuracy, McDonald became involved in all aspects of the series, from developing plots with the writer's room to reviewing the graphics and visual effects were correct in post-production. In August 2018, Egyptian video game developer Anas Abdin announced that he would sue CBS for allegedly copying elements of his unreleased video game tardigrades, including large tardigrades that helped humans travel through the universe instantly, and similar characters. The lawsuit was dismissed by Judge Lorna G. Schofield in September 2019, finding that the series and video games were not substantially similar as a matter of law, and the only similarities were the space setting and the use of alien tardigrades. Abdin appealed the dismissal by the U.S. Court of Appeals on the Second Circuit, upheld Schofield's decision in August of 2020, and they quit using the tardigrades. That's the reason why they don't use them anymore, that they ended up scrapping the tardigrades and giving the ability to one of the crew members, is because of the lawsuit. It's like, we don't mess with that anymore. Star Trek Discovery premiered on September 24th, 2017 on CBS All Access. The rest of the 15-episode first season was streamed weekly on All Access. Again, Paramount Plus now. Ending in February 2018. The 14-episode second season was released on All Access from January to April 2019. The 13-episode third season ran from October 2020 to January 2021. The 13th episode fourth season was released on Paramount Plus from November 2021 to March 2022. And a 10-episode fifth season was ordered in January 2022 and is again expected to be released in 2023. The series release did lead to record subscriptions for CBS All Access and became the most viewed original series on both All Access and Paramount Plus. It has received positive reviews from critics who have highlighted Martin Green's performance as the time jump to the 32nd century, as well as numerous accolades, including Primetime Emmy Awards for its prosthetic makeup and visual effects. The series began an expansion into the Star Trek franchise, leading to multiple new series, including the companion show series Star Trek Shorts, Short Treks, and the spinoff Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Various tie-in media and 2 official aftershows have been produced based on the series. The series began around 10 years before the events of Star Trek, the original series, when Commander Michael Burnham's action started war between the UFP and the Klingon Empire. She's court-martialed, stripped of her rank, and reassigned to the USS Discovery. We already talked about that. The USS Discovery finds the Federation fragmented in the future and investigates the cause of a cataclysm event known as the Burn. We talked about that as well. I think that's about all I have for Discovery. I know it's a lot. I was going back and forth through my notes. I was like, I need to talk about this. I need to talk about this. I like Discovery. I do see how it dodged around canon a little bit here and there. But I think for the most part, what they were trying to do in the first 2 to 3 seasons was fix the timeline, if that makes sense. Which they did. And now they're in the future and they don't necessarily have to worry about canon. But yeah, that's about it for Discovery, other than, kids, if you haven't been watching this, get out and watch it. And when they say it's science heavy, it is science heavy. When I say it's linguistically heavy with Klingons, you're going to be reading half an episode, at least, when you're watching the Klingon heavy episodes. But it's beautiful to hear them say, Kote Keletha. And I butchered that. In the light of Kalis. Because they say it beautifully. It's almost like Mary Chieffo is a native speaker of Klingon, which is weird because it's a made-up language, but she really took the time to study the language itself, almost like a linguist would.
Right.
like she was Tolkien. You know what I mean? It was beautiful. So yeah, kids, get out there and check out Discovery. The show's going to take a weird turn at the end of the second season. That's okay. Just keep following it. It's great.
Yeah, I've got Discovery on my list of things to watch. I mean, there's so much to watch out there now.
Yes.
Discovery is definitely one of them I want to watch. I just haven't got into it myself. So I've heard it's really, really good. Like I said, Chelsea has watched it and she's gone all the way through it. She said it was really good. So I really need to, I really need to give it a watch.
If
So
nothing
cool.
else for the Klingon.
Cool. Thank you for that. With that, we will jump over to the murdery side of the house.
Murder.
For today, I got my information off All That's Interesting, Wikipedia, and Crime Museum, and this is the story of Donald Pee Wee Gaskins.
Donald Pee Wee Gaskins.
Donald Henry Pee Wee Gaskins Jr., born Donald Henry Parrott Jr., was an American serial killer and rapist from South Carolina who stabbed, shot, drowned, and poisoned more than a dozen people.
Oh my God.
Before his convictions for murder, Gaskins had a long history of criminal activities resulting in prison sentences for assault, burglary, and statutory rape. His last arrest was for contributing to the delinquency of a minor, 13-year-old Kim Gelkin, who had gone missing in September of 1975. During their search for the missing girl, police discovered 8 bodies buried in a shallow grave near Gaskins' home in Prospect, South Carolina. Pee Wee Gaskins took to violence as early as age 11 when he and a group of friends burglarized, assaulted, and raped their neighbors. In the late 1970s, Pee Wee Gaskins was considered the most prolific serial killer in South Carolina history. But by the looks of him, Gaskins didn't seem like a cold-hearted murderer. At just 5'5" and 130 pounds, it seemed unbelievable that he managed to brutally murder at least 15 men, women, and children.
That's why they called him Pee Wee.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Okay.
But investigators found that Gaskins was fueled by an intense hatred that he harbored mostly for young women from an early age. They believed that this hatred stemmed from his home life, where his stepfather beat him and his mother looked the other way. Again, if you don't want to raise a serial killer, don't beat your kids.
Don't beat your kids.
Though his early crimes as a teenager were less severe, he quickly graduated from burglary to assaulting children, bludgeoning random victims, and even raping a toddler.
Oh my God.
When he was finally caught nearly a decade later, not even maximum security prison could curb his bloodlust, as just hours before his execution, Gaskins managed to murder an inmate with explosives. And so this is the disturbing true story of Donald Pee Wee Gaskins.
How the hell did he get okay. I'll wait for the end of the story.
I don't know how they get some of the stuff that they get in prison, but stuff definitely gets smuggled in.
Right on.
It happens. Donald Henry Gaskins was born on March 13th, 1933 in Florence County, South Carolina. His mother took little interest in him, and when he was just a year old, he accidentally drank some kerosene, from which he suffered intermittent convulsions for years thereafter. Later, he would reportedly try to blame his crimes on this unfortunate incident. Gaskins was often described as a great manipulator and con artist who was street smart and with a keen sense of humor and a friendly, entertaining personality. Gaskins also reportedly never knew his real father and was physically abused by his mother's various lovers. In fact, Gaskins was so neglected as a child that the first time he learned his given name was in court for a string of rapes and assaults he and his friends committed as preteens.
Holy crap. He didn't even know his real name?
Right.
Jesus. Okay.
Nicknamed Pee Wee due to his tiny stature, as we said, Gaskins was bullied routinely and dropped out of school when he was just 11 years old. He said, his daughter Shirley said, quote, "My daddy was a bad boy when he was little. My grandma said he was always doing something he wasn't supposed to do. He used to get whippings a lot." And a bad boy hardly encompasses just how troublesome Gaskins was as a child. He started working part-time at a local garage where he met 2 fellow dropouts with whom he formed a gang called the Trouble Trio. The moniker described the series of burglaries, assaults, and rapes that the 3 committed together, and sometimes they even raped little boys. Eventually, the trio broke up after they were caught for gang raping Marsh's little sister, and for punishment, the parents beat the boys until they bled. Danny and Marsh, part of the trouble trio, left the area shortly after that, and Donald Gaskins continued to burglarize homes alone. At 13, Gaskins allegedly graduated from rape to attempted murder. When robbing a home, a young girl walked in and caught him stealing. Gaskins cracked her over the head with an axe and left her to die, but she survived and easily identified Gaskins. He was consequently found guilty of assault with a deadly weapon and an intent to kill, and was sent to reform school on June 18, 1946, where he was expected to remain until he turned 18. Shortly after he was incarcerated, he was gang raped by 20 boys and agreed to sexually service the dorm's boss boy in exchange for protection. Gaskins repeatedly tried to escape the reform school, and of all his attempts, he was only successful one time. During this escape, he married a 13-year-old girl and then turned himself into the authorities to finish his sentence, and he was then freed on his 18th birthday. Gaskins first found employment on a local tobacco farm, where he quickly developed a scheme of stealing the crop and selling it on the side, as well as burning down the barns of others for a fee so that they could collect the insurance. But when a teenage girl mocked Gaskins for this gig, he split her skull open with a hammer.
Wow.
Gaskins was consequently sent away to the South Carolina State Penitentiary, where he was reportedly sexually enslaved by a gang leader. But Gaskin violently put an end to this when he slit a feared inmate's throat and earned everyone's respect. Yet he was convicted of manslaughter and spent 6 months in solitary confinement. He spent the next 20 years in and out of prison, escaping numerous times only to be reapprehended. Following his release from prison, Gaskins reverted to committing burglaries and fencing stolen property. He avoided arrest by working with a traveling minister as his driver and general assistant. This was an easy way Gaskins traveled from town to town while burglarizing homes, and would make his crimes harder to trace. 2 years after his parole, he was arrested for the rape of a 12-year-old girl, but absconded while awaiting sentence. Gaskins was rearrested in Georgia and sentenced to 8 years of imprisonment, and he was paroled again in November of 1968. Upon his release, Gaskins moved to the town of Sumter, South Carolina, and began working with a roofing company. For years, Gaskin mused over what he called them aggravated and bothersome feelings for which he found grisly outlets. As in September 1969, after serving 6 years in prison for statutory rape, when Gaskins embarked on his worst murder spree yet. That same year, Gaskins picked up a female hitchhiker. He propositioned her for sex, but when she laughed him off, he beat her unconscious. He then sodomized her, during which he realized how much he enjoyed prolonging her torture. Though he would subsequently keep his victim alive for days, he sank this first one into a swamp. Gaskins later described this first brutal murder as a vision into the bothersome feelings that haunted him throughout his life thus far. He mastered the skill of torture, often keeping his injured victims alive for days. Sometimes he would cannibalize their severed body parts and either make them watch him eat them in horror or join in the eating.
Oh, my God.
The following year, in November of 1970, Gaskins raped and murdered his 15-year-old niece, Janice Kirby, and her friend, Patricia Alsobrook, both of whom he beat to death. He poisoned Martha Ann Dix, age 20, in March of 1971, either because she said Pee-wee was the father of her unborn child, or because she was an alleged drug dealer who supplied Kirby and Alsbrook with drugs. Gaskins was an overt racist, and he raped and drowned both Doreen Hope Dempsey, 22, and her 2-year-old daughter, Robin Michelle Dempsey, in June of 1973. Gaskins had befriended Doreen Dempsey several years prior and was angry upon hearing she'd become pregnant a second time with an African-American man. She had been living with Gaskins' friend Johnny Sellers and his brother Carl Sellers in North Charleston, South Carolina. They brought her to Gaskins' home in Prospect and left her there to speak with Gaskins about staying with him for a short time while she was pregnant. Upset that Doreen was having a second biracial child, Gaskin responded by walking her to his backyard pond, where he drowned both the mother and her toddler.
Wow.
Though people started disappearing, it took years for Gaskins to become a suspect. By
Why?
1970, I don't know. I really don't know.
Clearly, this guy is a beating, murdering thing, and people start disappearing around him. Okay.
You'd think.
Yeah.
By 1973, Gaskins had been viewed as a strange but harmless resident of Prospect, South Carolina, despite his purchasing a hearse. It even had a sticker on the back that read, we haul anything, living or dead, but not even his public boasting of having his own private cemetery was taken seriously. Again, why?
Yeah. Hey, people are disappearing. This guy's over here saying he's got his own private cemetery. Oh, hey, look at his rap sheet. Look at all the stuff he's done.
Well, by June of 1974, Gaskins shot his friend and criminal associate Johnny Sellers in the back of the head and stabbed to death Johnny's ex-girlfriend, Jessie Ruth Judy, age 22, after Sellers asked for money he was owed from the sale of a stolen boat. Gaskin feared Sellers would reveal Gaskins was also involved in an auto theft ring. Jessie Judy was murdered at the same time because she could have told police about Gaskins' criminal activities, including murdering her boyfriend, Johnny Sellers. According to his own account, by 1975, Gaskins had murdered upwards of 80 people he had met along the South Carolina highway. He even raped a 2-year-old child after drowning its pregnant mother. But when 13-year-old Kim Gelkins vanished that year, authorities first caught the scent of Gaskins. It's interesting, that's when they first catch a scent of him. Prior to her disappearance, Gelkins had told people around town that she knew Gaskins. He lured her out to the country on the pretense of taking a vacation together, but instead he raped and tortured her. Silas Barnwell Yates, age 45, was murdered in February 1975 by having his throat slit in a murder-for-hire scheme. The forensics showed it was by knife, but Gaskins disputed this, saying it was done by karate chop. Yates was in a dispute with his ex-girlfriend, Suzanne Kipper Owens, and she and her husband, John Owens, paid Gaskin $1,500 to murder Yates. Diane Bellamy Neely, age 25, was separated from her husband, Walter Neely, who was one of Gaskin's closest friends and criminal conspirator. On April 10, 1975, Gaskin stabbed to death Diane Bellamy and shot dead her boyfriend, Avery Leroy Howard, age 34. Among other reasons, Gaskins murdered Diane Bellamy because she had threatened to report to police that Gaskins was allowing underage teenagers to have sex in his home. Avery Howard was murdered because he had asked for money to pay attorneys and cover legal expenses following his arrest for fraud and auto theft. Gaskins worried Avery Howard would tell police about Gaskins' criminal activities. Dennis Bellamy, age 27, and John Henry Knight, age 15, were half-brothers, and Diane Bellamy was their sister. Within minutes of each other, Gaskins shot the two brothers in the back of the head on October 10, 1975. Gaskins had promised to pay Dennis Bellamy for some stolen guns, and when confronted by Bellamy at Gaskins' trailer home in Prospect, South Carolina, he responded by offering to return the guns from the woods to behind his home. He took Bellamy into the woods to retrieve the guns, but murdered him instead. John Henry Knight was directed to the same area, allegedly to meet his brother, but he was also murdered to ensure he could never speak of the crimes. Gaskins was finally caught when his lackey, an ex-con named Walter Neely, who helped him to disappear bodies, led police to the corpses of 8 of Gaskins' victims. And on April 26, 1976, he was finally arrested. While he later confessed to the other 7 murders, Gaskins claimed that he had committed up to 90 others. He explained that some of these were random hitchhikers, while others were professional hit jobs. And he told the judge, quote, "There are quite a few bodies that have never been mentioned, but you've got enough for now."
Huh.
Authorities were unable to substantiate these claims and believe Gaskins was merely trying to brag, but his daughter Shirley remains confident that her father was telling the truth. Charged with 8 counts of murder, Gaskins was found guilty on the first on May 24, 1976, and was sentenced to death. While on death row, Gaskins said he committed between 100 and 110 murders, including that of Margaret Peg Catino, the 13-year-old daughter of then South Carolina State James Catino Jr. of Sumter. These murders have been widely disputed, and there have been no evidence to support Gaskins' statement. Gaskins enjoyed a brief reprieve in November of 1976 when the Supreme Court ruled South Carolina's death penalty unconstitutional. Though the death penalty was reinstated in 1978, Gaskins was destined to live out the rest of his life behind bars. Then he accepted a hit job to be taken out on a fellow inmate, and he was found guilty of murder yet again. Rudolph Tyner was incarcerated for murdering an elderly couple. The couple's son, eager to see him dead, hired Gaskins to finish the job. Tyner was being kept in solitary confinement, which made matters a bit difficult. And Gaskins tried to poison him first, but Tyner always vomited the food back up. Gaskins told his accomplice on the phone, "I came up with something. He can't be no damn making sick on it. I need one electric cap and as much of a stick of damn dynamite as you can get."
Holy shit.
After garnering Tyner's trust, Gaskins managed to rig a radio with explosives and convince him that he would allow them to communicate from cell to cell. Instead, the dynamite blew Tyner to pieces and earned Gaskins a death sentence. Investigators only had to review Gaskins' prison calls to get the evidence they needed that brought him to the electric chair. Gaskins said, "I'll take a damned radio and rig it into a bomb, and when he plugs that son of a bitch up, it will blow him to hell." Gaskins was almost spared the electric chair on the night before his execution. He tried to take matters into his own hands and slashed his wrist. It took 20 stitches to repair him for the electric chair. He was executed on September 6, 1991, and it's possible that dozens of his victims still remain bogged down and decomposed in South Carolina marshes. The life of Donald Pee Wee Gaskins was one rooted in abuse, trauma, and neglect, and he fostered endless wrath against those he believed wronged him. It's unknown as to how many murders Gaskins actually committed, since information was never provided for all the bodies, and maybe he just wanted to be known as the most prolific serial killer in South Carolina. The one thing we know for certain is that Donald Gaskins was a psychopath who had no regard for human life.
Apparently not.
And that is the story of Donald Pee Wee Gaskins.
Oh my God, that guy was crazy. Thank you for the story.
Oh, you're welcome.
That guy was just nuts.
Yes. Yes, he was. This was not a good dude.
Not a good dude at all.
But when do I cover good dudes?
That's true. That's true.
I'll guarantee that next week I don't have another good dude.
You pretty sure? Not a good dude?
I'm fairly certain that next week I do not have another good dude.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, sir.
You're very welcome. Excuse me. So that'll take us to the end of another recording week. As always, please remember that you can find more information on our website, nerderyandmurdery.com. You can find links to everything we talked about, plus pictures and links to our YouTube page.
That's right. We do have a YouTube page where every single episode, at least for the nerdery part, has a playlist, so you can see videos and explanations and things that we're talking about. Kind of give you a feel for it.
Yeah, Zig does a really good job on that, so please do endeavor to check that out.
Thank you, sir.
You can also find the link to our merchandise, or if you wish to show off your Nerdery Murdery fandom, please do consider purchasing some merchandise. That, along with our link to our Patreon. Our patrons do help, as well as our merchandise, help to keep this show going. There are costs that are associated with the show, so we do appreciate each and every one of you who have purchased merchandise and each one of our patrons.
Please and thank you.
Please and thank you. And last but not least, please don't forget to leave a 5-star review wherever you can. It really helps us and helps others find our the type of information that we are covering. So with that,
I have been Zig with your nerdery.
And I'm Geoffrey with your murdery.
Cue the music.